Good afternoon to you, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Here it is now Wednesday, the 16th day of August 2023, and we have a lot to discuss today. The tropics are definitely perking up. We've got some areas in the Atlantic Basin to keep an eye on, but I think the biggest story, in fact, I'm almost sure it will be the biggest story of the next week or so, unless that system in the Gulf does something surprising. The biggest story is going to be what happens with eventual Hurricane Hilary in the eastern Pacific, and how that interacts with the Baja and vicinity, and then eventually the southwest United States. That could be a really big, high-impact event, big newsmaker, and we're going to talk about that and more in today's update. All right, good to have you with me. Let's get started, shall we? First, National Hurricane Center homepage. Here we are, a couple of areas out here. Neither of them have been designated as an invest area. We don't have an invest number. So just a couple of disturbances out here. And these are showing up on the 48-hour outlook, 2 days. You can see that right here. And then if we expand it out to 7 days, we include the area in the Gulf of Mexico, still sitting at 20%. Not sure as to what's going to happen with this Gulf feature. We'll take a look at that as we progress through this update. All right, first of all, a couple of satellite shots for you here, this animation. A good deal of the Western Hemisphere, show you what's going on. There is, I think that's Fernanda, right? And it's dying away in cooler waters and a more stable air mass out that way. And then here is what is going to be a very powerful and juicy Hurricane Hilary. It's going to have a lot of moisture with it, and it is going to have some impacts here for the coastal areas of Mexico, from swells and the outer rain bands, even all the way down here near where it's already forming. We're getting some outer bands there, but then up along the Baja could be pretty serious impacts up that way. And then the big question mark, we'll go ahead and just draw it in here, for the western United States, the southwest as a whole, somewhere in this region, could get some very heavy rain, and that could be a very big concern going forward. I know we need the rain out west. We talked about that a lot during the wintertime, during the atmospheric river events that kept coming and coming. Yes, you need the water. Yes, the water is a good thing. But when you get potentially a year's worth of water in a very short amount of time from something like an old, well, I say old, a post-tropical system, we'll say that, that could be very problematic. So a lot of things to watch here over the coming days. Eastern Pacific is included in our area of interest out here. A lot of people live in Mexico. A lot of people have interest in the desert Southwest, especially when these systems come up from the Eastern Pacific. Here's what we have on the tracking map. Again, nothing in the Atlantic Basin right now. I think that should change within the next several days to maybe a week, gradually getting more favorable in the Atlantic. But in the meantime, we do have a lot of activity in the Eastern Pacific, Central Pacific as well. That would be Greg. It is weakening. There's Fernanda. It is also weakening. And then here, as we zoom in on our interactive map off the HurricaneTrack Insider site, you can see the track here, forecast for Hilary. But remember, we don't always think of category and wind and all that. We have to think outside the category. I think that's a good catchphrase to use. It's mine. I just coined it. We're going to make a graphic of it and everything. Think outside the category. A lot of attention is going to be placed on, oh, it's very rare for a tropical system to make landfall in California. And that's not really what we need to be looking at. While, yes, that would be very interesting and novel, trivial, etc., like it's something we would look back on years later and say, hey, do you remember in 2023, if it happened, when Tropical Storm Hilary made landfall in San Diego County, or whatever. The bigger problem, and what people really need to be looking at and asking the question, multiple questions, what are the impacts going to be? We're going to have swells coming up. That's going to impact south-facing beaches, an increase in humidity, windy conditions, heavy rain in some of these big population areas, maybe up to Los Angeles, maybe over to Death Valley, Las Vegas, southwestern Arizona. Now, if it comes up more to the east, we could be looking at more towards Phoenix. That's a big metro area. We know that. So, yeah, this could be a really big problem for our friends out here. And so don't get caught up in the will it make landfall as a tropical entity or not. That doesn't matter at the end of the day when people have potentially raging floodwaters going through their neighborhoods. Believe me, they're not going to say, well, you know what, at least it made landfall as a tropical storm. The impacts are what matters, not the category when it's all said and done. Seriously, keep that in mind, all right? So moving on along, related to it, Hilary, here are the key messages from the National Hurricane Center. Impacts along the Baja all the way up to the southwestern United States. Obviously, we're just getting started here. Today was the first advisory, right? So it's too soon to determine the location and magnitude of rainfall and wind impacts. So it is prudent to tell you that interest in these areas, the Baja, southwestern United States, should just simply keep an eye on what's happening with Hilary over the next several days. Now, this was important as well. The second bullet point, large swells from Hilary will spread northward along the coast of southwestern Mexico and the Baja during the next few days, and that'll eventually make its way, that wave energy, up to Southern California. It is going to be quite the spectacle. Hilary is forecast to be a very strong hurricane, and it's going to have an amazing eye, and you just wait and see. And then what happens after that, that's what the big emphasis here is going to be. So this is Dr. Daniel Swain, out in the West Coast, climate scientist, all the credentials that you can see there. So I want to make sure I cite people whom I trust and who put out relevant, helpful information. And I relied on Dr. Swain during the winter for some of the atmospheric river stuff that I followed. So this is very prudent here for what could potentially be coming. Nice infographic here already put out here from the River Forecast Center. That's the California-Nevada River Forecast Center. Yes, they do have these out west because, yes, there are rivers out west. We have the Southeast River Forecast Center in the southeastern United States out of Peachtree City as an example. But yes, we do have these out west as well. Some of the early guidance on forecast rain, you look at these and you say, come on, Mark, that's really not that much, 3, 4, 6 inches, if that. But this is the desert Southwest we're talking about. 2 to 3 inches of rain, especially if it's torrential tropical rain, can cause flash flooding. You got I-10 through there, Interstate 8 that comes out of Phoenix, Vegas there along I-15, Death Valley, a very popular area. A lot of people hiking out here this time of year, still out on vacation, maybe up into some of the parks of Arizona and Utah. We have to remember that as well. So yes, we're going to have to follow this closely. And in fact, might as well make mention of this now, I will be heading out there. It is a tropical system. I go out there for the monsoon. I went out in January for the big atmospheric river event, at least one of many that were big and impactful. So I'm flying out Friday. I'm going to start in Phoenix and then take some equipment and spread it out and see what we capture. It's going to be very dynamic. There's not really a way for me to know exactly where I'm going to be, what I'm going to see, so forth and so on. But I'll talk about more about my plans as we get closer to Friday. I fly out of here Friday afternoon, and I'll be working out in the desert Southwest as Hilary comes in. I'm going to have the drone with me, taking Starlink, so that we can stream from anywhere and have access to data anywhere. I know some of these places very well. I know some people out there already, and because I've been out there a few times, that really helps. And again, I have to emphasize, a lot of people are going to be like, come on, man, it's not that big a deal. Wait for the hurricanes along the Gulf Coast or the Atlantic. You got to remember, I'm a geographer at heart, a weather geek as well, studied weather and climate in college, and all of this is important. And it is a tropical cyclone creating impacts when this does happen. So you bet your bottom dollar, or whatever a good phrase is, you bet your butt I'm going to be out there. Absolutely. This is fascinating to me, especially when tropical moisture interacts with the desert Southwest. You speed up geologic time, and it can be very impactful to people and the environment, and a combination of the two. So yes, I'm headed out there. We'll talk about that more tomorrow and Friday morning before I head to the airport. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic Basin, first of all, there's Hilary over there. That is going to be a big one. Not a lot happening in terms of anything imminent. We still have all this dust sitting out here. You can clearly see it. Hopefully this translates really well when I process this video and we put it up on YouTube in high definition. But you can also see with this monsoon trough sitting out here, and that's just a nice focusing mechanism. It's like a big old grapevine. Will there be any ripe grapes that come off of that vine? That's the question. And we can see some of those, using that analogy, trying to ripen and get going here. Maybe one vortmax, as we call it, or vorticity maxima, a local area of concentrated spin. And clearly, there's another one right there. That one kind of looks like this one over here, which is Hilary, right? Kind of looks like that in terms of the very large, broad nature to the turning. Yeah, you can definitely see that. And then there's some innocuous energy sitting down here. Innocuous right now. It's part of the Saharan air layer. It's kind of embedded in it. We've got this stalled front that's sitting over here. Warm, warm, warm Gulf and Southwest Atlantic waters. Maybe something tries to get going somewhere in this vicinity in a few days. That's the other part of this. So let's take a look at some of the things that we try to use to discern what's happening and what might happen from what we've got out there. First of all, nothing really to speak of anywhere near the Gulf. There's some of that energy down in the vicinity of the islands that I think is going to kind of pivot its way up and then try to consolidate in the Gulf. I think that's the best guess as to where that energy comes from. Usually it doesn't just come out of nowhere. Sometimes you can get an upper level low that works its way down to the surface. These stalled fronts can be a focusing mechanism. And then occasionally you kind of pile everything up on top of each other and you have a hybrid mix of everything and you get tropical cyclogenesis that way. So we'll have to wait and see. But look out here in the Atlantic, the energy kind of spread out over a large area, but maybe a little bit more focusing there, and it's off this particular satellite extent here. This is a satellite image. It's just showing vorticity. It is not a computer model. It is an actual analysis taken from satellite, the GOES 16, I believe, the GOES East, yep. And we can see that vorticity here off the coast of Africa. So one or both of these might try to develop, and we could get a name storm out of either of them, or both, right? And then maybe, just maybe, something over here in the Gulf, potentially from this energy in a few days. So let's take a look back over to the Eastern Pacific real quick. There's Hilary right there. Watch what happens. All that green, that's that deep moisture. This is going to make its way up along the west coast of Mexico toward the Baja, rapidly intensifying there. Very large hurricane, huge area of moisture. And let me just switch this to what we call the CONUS shot. The lower 48 is another way to look at it. And you can see that moisture really starts to get pulled up into the western United States, through the Baja, northwest Mexico, and there is a lot of it. But also, I want to show you this, the 500 millibar height, about 20,000 feet in the atmosphere. Look at, let's use black to outline this. Look at that giant bubble of air sitting over the nation's midsection. That's your 594 height line. It's like a contour map of the atmosphere. That is the key to the whole evolution of Hilary for the most part. We do have a big upper low and a trough off the northeast coast. Watch how these systems kind of move, if you will, and evolve over time. The key is, where does this giant ridge set up? And it's not certainly permanent. So how does it ebb and flow? That's a better way to put it, because you've also got this upper level energy over here, and Hilary tries to find the weakness between the two and make its way into the southwest United States. Because you got to remember, this is a big old heat dome here. This is big and thick, and Hilary can't just go into it. Just like if you had one of these out over the Atlantic, hurricanes don't just track right into these. They go around them like water balloons butting up against larger water balloons. They interact with each other. There are no solids. Everything's a fluid out there. So watch what happens. Hilary comes up around the backside of that monster ridge over the nation's midsection, and then it crosses up the Baja and into Southern California on Monday. If this verified verbatim, Monday morning rush hour, I mean, I know that would be about 4 a.m. California time, but boy, oh boy, it would be still very wet out there, a windy night, probably going to have some power lines down, things like that, if that came to pass exactly as the model is showing. That's 5 days from now, 120 hours out. So it's not 8 or 10 or something crazy like that, but if this high, this is interesting, if you just take that big old oval right there and then the rest of the influence from it, and you shift it east a little bit, you shift it west a little bit. Any nuance there, it could be a little bit more offshore, it could be more up the Baja into the Gulf of California, and then maybe we get a landfall, so to speak, or an active tropical cyclone over Yuma, Arizona. Who knows? But the moisture that's coming with it, absolutely going to be prolific and very impactful in terms of rain, and a lot of it all the way up into parts of the Pacific Northwest as well. So this is not just a Southwest U.S. situation. A big event coming from that system. Now, this is also interesting. Hilary currently located down here. The track, of course, is going to come up this way, potentially. And these are the water temperature anomalies. They are above average, except right along the coast of the Baja. So yeah, it is going to encounter warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, and they are just slightly warmer than normal, even off the coast of Southern California. A couple areas of slightly below, but if it moves fast enough around that big fat ridge sitting over here, and it can just get slingshotted around it, it could bring more than just rain. And that's going to be really interesting, and that's a really big part of the reason why I'm going to go out there. This does have the potential, I hate using this word because it gets tossed around a lot, this could be historic. Not necessarily that it's going to be devastating, but a history-making event. We haven't seen a landfall of a tropical system. I know we don't want to emphasize it, but it has been a long, long time. All right, so just keep all that in mind when we're thinking about Hilary over the next several days. Now, what about the Atlantic Basin? More interest there. I get it. So let's get to it, shall we? This is the 850 millibar version of the GFS here. 12Z run, 5,000 feet in the atmosphere is roughly where we are talking about. Talk about high pressure. Look at that. Huge old subtropical ridge sitting out here. There are our features, this giant area, that monsoon trough carved out there with little lobes of vorticity trying to compete and take over and bundle that heat energy and take off. And then just a little bit of energy right there that might be the precursor, still trying to figure it out, of our potential Gulf system. So let's just move this into motion. There's 24 hours, 48. Maybe something tries to get going in the eastern Atlantic. Again, those two competing with each other. We'll have to just wait and see. No threat to land at all anytime soon from those, no matter what they do. So now we get out to about 72 hours, and we start to see a little bit of a reflection here in the overall height lines of the map. Some energy there. That's our feature that we're going to want to watch. That is Saturday, and then on to Sunday. Not much comes of it from the GFS this go around, but just to show you how tricky this is going to be, this is what it was like last night on the 0Z. It concentrated that energy, and it suggested that a tropical cyclone makes landfall somewhere near South Padre in about a week. But that's a week out from last night. You go to 6Z, a few hours later, a big old nothing down there. More of a rainmaker. Actually, you won't say nothing. I shouldn't say that. But not a concentrated area of anything to really be concerned with. The 12Z today, a continuation of that. What are we going to see later on? That's the big question, right? What do we know? We know that the Gulf is very warm. The upper level pattern probably going to be pretty favorable. So we're going to have to just wait and see. I know we all hate that. I hate it from a planning perspective. I could be out in, Yuma, Arizona or wherever, Death Valley, with raging floodwaters covering that, and then something's trying to sneak into the Gulf there and develop quickly like Hannah did in 2020, just as an example. I was also in the desert Southwest when that happened. Story for another day. Actually, I did a whole Hurricane Highway episode about that. It's called The Land of Fire and Water or something like that. I think that's what I titled the episode. It's under our playlist of Season 2 of the Hurricane Highway if you'd like to watch it. And you can see how I missed a hurricane back in 2020. I don't want that to happen again. So a lot of moving parts here. But the bottom line in terms of the eastern side of the Rockies, no tropical troubles anytime soon. We can just take this out to a week and nothing really to worry about. Maybe that gets named. Maybe the other one does. They should stay out in the open Atlantic. So as I have mentioned recently, we are very happy to be partnering with Quick Dams. And it's not just a sponsorship or anything like that. We are talking a true collaborative effort to get the word out about this amazing set of products that they have. And as we get closer to the peak of the hurricane season, I'm going to be talking more about it. In fact, on my trip out to the west, I will be taking some of their products with me. And I think we're going to see a lot of pictures, potentially, of people filling sandbags. They are effective, but it is a waste of effort and energy and resources, time that could be used when we have better technology. And let me just show you a little bit about that real quick. You look at their different products that they have. Really, really incredible. This is the outdoor flood control. The flood bags, these take the place of traditional sandbags. They come flat, very, very small, but then they absorb the water and then they become your barrier. And they are, depending on how many you need, you could spend a lot of money or just a little bit. And that's a lot better than having to deal with these sandbags, let me tell you. So I'm going to take some of these with me. They shipped a bunch of stuff to me. I'm going to pack a few of them and take them out there to the west. Look at that. These things are so small, and you don't have to fill them with anything. You just set them up, they absorb the water, and you're good to go. These are available, all their products, across many different big box retailers, Ace, BJ's, look at this, Lowe's, wow, Home Depot, really getting it done there, Amazon as well. Hey, look, I was talking to the president, Carol, yesterday. We did a meeting, and she mentions, this is very true, they're no good if you don't have them, right? It's too late. If you don't have them when the floodwaters come, it is too late. So whether it's what we're getting ready to face out west or the upcoming hurricane season, we're actually going to be working with Quick Dams to show how the stuff actually does work in a partnership together to try to help people. Remember when plywood, and it probably unfortunately still is, a thing, everybody boards up their windows, and then along came polycarbonate and aluminum-based storm panels. Plywood is useless after it gets rained on. It starts to buckle, and we tried to get people away from that. Back when I was working with Lowe's many years ago, we did have an active campaign to re-educate people, have a smart consumer. Hey, look, use the polycarbonate. It's a little bit more expensive. Back then it was like $100 a sheet. But the thing is, it wouldn't warp or be useless after it gets rained on. And you can store it and use it over and over. Plus, you could see out of it. That was much better technology, right? And the same thing here with Quick Dams and the technology that they have. Very, very effective. And if it's indoor water problems, outdoor flooding, to mitigate against it. That's that term, mitigate, lessen the effects over time. Check their website out, quickdams.com. One of our partners, sponsor, whatever you want to call it. Just a great group of people. I've been up to their headquarters in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and I'm just absolutely fascinated. So maybe we'll be using some of their stuff, some of their technology. They actually have a thing called a drip mat, by the way, kind of like one of those puppy pee pads that people get. But the drip mat is nice. I know we get a lot of rain when I'm working, of course, and snow in the wintertime, and you get in the vehicle gets wet, and it starts smelling pretty bad after just a day or two, right? Any storm chasers, anybody in the news business, anybody working in the elements, you know that. Well, these drip mats, they come big enough. I'm taking some of those with me as well, because it's going to be raining in the southwest, and I'm going to put those in my rental vehicle to help absorb that water and keep it dry in there. Hopefully it won't smell like I had a fleet of dogs in there with me for 3 days. All right? So yeah, really interesting stuff, interesting people we're working with. That's my job, is to educate you and point you in the right direction, whether we're talking about the tropics or things that can help you to deal with the impacts. Very happy to be working with Quick Dams. So check them out, quickdams.com. Speaking of .com, let's get this on youtube.com for you, and we'll see what happens over the next few days, all right? I'm Mark Sudduth. As always, thanks for tuning in. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow afternoon.